So we've looked at timber durability, we've looked at timber stability, and we've understood the impact that that has. But what about Accoya? Why is that so special? So what is Accoya wood? Well, there's no such tree as an Accoya tree. It's basically a timber called radiata pine, which is grown in New Zealand. It goes through a modification process, which is different to just a standard treatment process. And it changes the characteristics of the timber. So it's so different from the original timber, they decided to give it its own name. The process is called acetylation. Without going into it in too much depth, it changes the molecular structure of the timber. Importantly, it does two things to the timber. It stops it being a food source for rot-causing organisms. So rot is basically fungi that are digesting the cellulose in timber. In Accoya, the food source for organisms is just removed. That's why it doesn't rot. And that's what gives it its durability. Accoya's got class 1 durability, whereas we said sort of benchmark, oak has got class 2 durability. Many of the other standards are around about 3 or 4. And there are a few other timbers that are class 1 durability. Pretty much all of the others are very slow grown, very dense, and tropical hardwoods that really are a no-go for manufacture. In terms of its resistance to decay, realistically, there's nothing that comes close to it. The second thing about the modification process is that it changes the stability of the timber. All timber moves to some extent. Now, Accoya timber virtually eliminates the movement. It's about 75% more stable than standard joinery timbers. Realistically, what that means in practice for windows and doors is that they don't change size and shape, they don't swell up, or it's such a tiny amount that it's negligible. That's the bit that has such a massive impact on joinery. The Accoya delivers that absolute rock-solid stability throughout its life. In that sense, it really is standalone. There is nothing that is as stable as Accoya. I've got a little field trial that I set up a few years ago, and it was just a way of demonstrating the sort of characteristics of Accoya. So we've got a piece of Accoya and a piece of softwood screwed onto a tree stump next to each other, and they're just left outdoors, and they've been like that for the last 7 years. So I haven't really looked at it, I haven't seen it for a couple of years, so let's go and have a look and see what it looks like. Okay, somewhere buried down in that little lot are our timber samples. Right, there they are. There's my pieces of timber. Okay, there they are. Here we have it then. It's January 2020. These were put here sometime early 2013. Tree stump's going all rotten. That one's the Accoya. That's sound. This one here on the right is the softwood, and that there is looking pretty rotten. That's right through. That's the Accoya, just eating away there. And then that's the Accoya sample. You see that? Okay, it's a little bit dirty, but it's in perfect condition. It's completely gone. Oh well. Yeah, look, stainless steel screws are doing. Oh god, look at the underneath of that one. Slug's enjoying it. Well, I'm going to put it back. Leave it for another few years, and maybe we'll come back. When we come to making a new window using Accoya, we'll just have a little close look over the joint of one of these windows, just show you what's going on, how it's assembled. The Accoya timber used here, and it's stable, it's not expanding or contracting to such a tiny degree, means that that joint line won't crack. That problem area, the area where we saw all those doors start to fail, that will remain in perfect condition throughout its life. And that's one of the keys to the longevity of a window. Now, one other very important thing about that stability and the impact that it has, and that's to do with the paint finish. A paint finish is basically a film that sits on top of the timber. If the paint finish can't accommodate that expansion and contraction in the timber happening throughout its life over years and years, then that's what ultimately causes the paint finish to start cracking and peeling. And that's what we saw earlier on some of those doors. Now, a good, modern, high-quality paint finish should be flexible and it should be microporous. But still, over the years and years and the life of a piece of wood outdoors experiencing that movement, paints can't cope with that amount of movement over a prolonged period of time. So the fact that the Accoya doesn't have that movement in it basically means that the paint finish has a far, far longer life. It's one of the great benefits of Accoya. The paint finish simply doesn't have to constantly stretching to accommodate that timber movement. And that's why we're able to guarantee the paint finish for 10 years when we're using it on Accoya. The other aspect about Accoya timber and its choice in windows, which has become more and more important in today's climate crisis. So we've all seen on the media about needing to reduce our reliance on plastics and how basically they don't degrade, about the fossil fuels that go into their manufacture and the energy that's produced and the pollutants that they produced. Now, when you think about how timber gets produced and a tree growing, I mean, the actual growth process requires virtually no energy. During that growth process, the timber will absorb carbon dioxide, so it will absorb this very thing that we're trying to reduce. It will absorb carbon dioxide and give out oxygen. Basically, it's life-giving to our planet. In that regard, as a material, timber can be and is an endlessly renewable resource. The only sound environmental choice for a material for windows is timber. But surely logic says then, if that's what trees are delivering, we don't want to be cutting them down. Well, so in actual fact, the best environmental policy is to use a fast-grown timber, a fast plantation-grown timber, grow it fast, cut it in use. You want to get the longest service life that you can from it, and in the meantime, regrow another crop of timber. And that's actually, ecologically, that has the most impact on reducing carbon emissions. That key thing about the speed of growth is a really important point, because with most of the other joinery timbers, they're slow-grown timbers. They take a long time to reach maturity, 50, 70, 100 years to reach a maturity at which they can be cut for timber. Even if there is replanting that's going on there to replenish those timbers, there are question marks about realistically how effective can it be. So if we're cutting timbers that have taken 70 years to grow and they're going to last 30 years in use, that's a sort of balance that doesn't work out. And it's the exact opposite with Accoya. Now, one of the interesting things here is if you look at the growth rings, you can see how fast this timber is grown. It's very, very quick grown timber. In its raw state, the timber is of no use whatsoever outdoors, but the modification process basically transforms it into something which is exceptional outdoors. So you've got a fast-grown timber. This timber takes around about 27 years to grow to maturity before it's forested. Now, that's very, very, very quick for a timber. Then it's cut, then it's harvested and replanted. And the other thing then to think about is the length of time that this timber will be in service. It's guaranteed for 50 years outdoors. It's got an expected service life of 70 years plus, and it takes 27 years to grow it. So straight away, the balance between how long it takes to grow and its service life in use is completely the other way around to all other timbers. What that means is that something that you're putting in, because it doesn't need to get replaced. I mean, if you used a softwood, for example, that over that 70-year period, you'd have replaced it 3 times. The net effect on the energy that's taken to produce that timber is reduced threefold because you haven't got to replace it as quickly. The timber does go through a process. It's not a traditional treatment process. So the timber is not filled with poisons. There is nothing toxic in the timber. The rot resistance, which in most other timber treatments is caused by biocides, is basically caused by poison. And they kill organisms. So they're not very good for the environment when they go back into the environment at the end of their life. Now with the Accoya, because it's not full of biocides, it's not a treatment, at the end of its life, it just degrades again. It just basically goes back into the ecosystem. There's no detrimental effect whatsoever. And that's one of the key aspects about it, which makes it a very strong ecological choice. So hopefully in this video we have explained the importance of timber choice and the benefits that Accoya gives you.